Hey friends, welcome to Homegrown Florida. I'm Patrina and today we're going to be doing a little bit of a garden tour. I'm going to walk you through my April Central Florida garden and show you everything that's thriving. But at the same time, we're going to talk about my 5 biggest mistakes that I've made in the garden throughout the many years that I've been gardening. Some of which I still make to today so that you guys don't make the same mistakes that I did and you can have a beautiful, flourishing, productive garden. So let's start out with these 4 beds right here. These were my original beds that I started when we first moved into this house 5 years ago. So they are probably the most mature in terms of like the soil health. And there's one big reason for that, and that is mulch. So my biggest mistake that I made when I first started gardening, not at this house because this, we started gardening here 5 years ago. I've been gardening for about 10 years. So we had another house, and that house, I never put mulch in. I never did mulch. I didn't really do that until I got here. And I used lots of different kinds of mulches. So right here, we have like a shredded wood mulch. And then over here, I'm using sand. And I know that that's not typical for mulch. I was actually just kind of topping my beds and I kind of realized that sand actually is a pretty decent mulch. Over in this bed, I have, you guys are gonna laugh, palm fronds. We cut down our palm tree. We were trimming it up or whatever, try to let some light in, and we had all these palm fronds, and I thought, you know, I bet you I could use that as mulch. I did research it, and palm fronds take like forever to break down. So it's not like the best organic mulch that you could do, but honestly, if I have it, I'm gonna use it. So I just chopped it up. This is not a good example of that. Usually I was chopping this into smaller pieces, but this one got away from me. But I used that to mulch my potatoes, which I thought worked out really well because potatoes like really break down mulch super fast, and then you could have this possibility of the potatoes reaching the surface and then they turn green and then you lose your crop. And then over here, I have dead plants. I actually have some snapdragons over here that were doing so well, almost too well, that they were out competing my beautiful corn, you guys. I'm so excited about this corn. I'm gonna tell you about that in a second. But I have some snapdragons that were outpacing the corn, and it was kind of shading it out, so I gave it a good trim. And then I just threw those pieces of the snapdragons back into the garden bed. Works great, and it's a great organic mulch because it's giving back to the soil. But let's talk about what I got going on right here. I got a lot of stuff. So first off, my pride and joy over here is my corn. I'm growing sweet corn. I have grown corn in the past. There's been some struggles with being able to keep it fed and to keep the pests off it. But so far this year, it's been doing amazing. And there's a little trick to that. So as long as my corn works out, I will be sharing that with you guys later. Make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss out on that, because corn is actually kind of difficult to grow in a backyard garden. And I think it's just been something that has been difficult for me. I have had success in the past, but not consistently. So we're doing something new this year that I tried a couple years ago and I haven't repeated. So if it works again, I know that it works. But next to the corn, I'm really excited about this. I'm growing pole blue lake beans. You've probably heard of bush blue lake or blue lake bush beans. I grow those a lot, but I wanted to grow the pole variety because I feel like with bush beans, I get like 1 or 2 really good harvests and then the plant just really goes downhill fast. And I was like, I really want to be able to get a lot of green beans because I'm just not getting enough. I have a whole bed of little bush beans and I feel like it's not enough. And in my experiences, I've kind of found that pole varieties of anything, cucumbers, beans, squashes, whatever, they just produce more. So I found these pole beans and I started growing them, and I already can tell that there's 10 plants here and I have 30 plants in a bed over there, and these 10 plants I can already tell are producing as much if not more than those 30 plants. So we might have a winner here for green beans. I might get my year's supply of green beans with these 10 little plants, which would be amazing. So I'm excited about that, but then even more excited, I know this is just so silly, but this is my thing. I started some squash in here, and so when you combine pole beans with squash and corn, you get the Three Sisters planting, which is a type of companion planting that works so well. It's like back to Native Americans did this in their gardens or in their agriculture, and the 3 plants work together to create this perfect system for the plants to be fed, to be shaded, and to have a trellis to climb. So we're gonna check out my three sisters a little bit later on in the season. I'm super stoked about them. And in that bed, I also have a couple other things like green onions and the snapdragons. And in this bed, I have some really sad looking garlic. My garlic was not, wasn't a great year for me because of timing. We're gonna talk about timing a little bit more, but I got off with the timing. But here I have my very beautiful, I'm in love with them, perennial green onions. They're called the Florida Finley green onions, and they are a perennial multiplier onion. I only know of 2 places that you can get them from. If you guys know more places, let me know. I know Cody Cove Farm has them, and I know Whitwam Organics has them. Both of those places are almost always sold out, and you have to go on a wait list, and it can take like a year to get them. So just be patient, and if you know of another place, let me know. Over in this bed, I have peppers, or on this side of the bed, I have peppers that are doing well. I got one that's not looking great, it's a little yellow. And then over here, I have some last minute winter crops. Honestly, I'm keeping them just to see how long they'll go. Not so much that I think that they're gonna do great this time of year. I honestly don't think they will. But so far, the pests are staying off them, and they are still growing. I have one beet that has formed up, and then I have some cabbages. The rest of the beets, I'm just checking to see how hot it is before they kind of give up. Right next to that, I have a couple random tomato plants. I have a squash, and then I have my tomatillos and some kale at the end. Over here is my spring crop of potatoes, which are doing amazing. I was honestly worried about them because I put them in the ground a while ago. I want to say like February, I put them in the ground and they didn't sprout. And I figured that something went wrong again because this has happened to me. So then I was like, oh, they're not gonna sprout. And I had all this extra sand. It's our native sand. My husband was doing a project where he was putting in a French drain in the front of the house because we had some water pooling up in certain areas. But so he had to dig out this trench to put that there. And is a ton of native sand that was available. So I started topping my beds with that. That bed had sunk quite a bit. And so I put a lot of sand in that bed. And then all of a sudden I'm walking by it and I notice little potato sprouts. And so there is like, I don't know, I buried them 5 inches deep into the soil, and then I probably put 6 inches of sand on top. It's gonna be pretty wild trying to dig those potatoes up, but they're doing beautifully with that sand on top. So you can use a lot of different things as mulches in your garden, but definitely stick to the organic stuff, guys. That's wood, grass clippings, plant debris, dead leaves, sand. Apparently, compost is even a really good mulch that you can put down. Something that insulates the soil underneath to keep it nice and moist and to keep it cool. So that's one of my biggest mistakes that I made that I really encourage you not to do the same. So now we moved on to my super long bed. This is actually 5 beds in one. They're 4x8 beds, and it's a whole length of 5 beds. It is my longest garden bed, but I really love the length. It's really great for vining varieties like what's going on right here. I have some melons, some cantaloupe, and some watermelons, but I've also grown Seminole pumpkins in this bed. I've grown beans in this bed and kind of just let them vine out however they want. It's been a great bed for the length. But the biggest mistake I have learned is timing. Timing here, I think timing's really important in any climate that you're in or in any state that you're in, but here in Florida it is particularly important because we have these weird windows. The windows of growing here are quite different than some of the other states, which I know sounds really odd because like we can grow year round. So most of our northern friends are going to be like, you can grow year round. What are you talking about? Yeah, we can grow year round, but we can grow certain things year round. And honestly, not any. Green onions is the only thing that I can think of that grows year round without stopping. The rest of the plants, typically there is break points. So we have break points in winter, just like our northern friends do, where it gets too cold, or maybe if you're in South Florida, it doesn't get too cold, but you have less daylight hours, the temperature is cooler, so the plants don't want to grow as well. So we have that situation that happens in winter. Here where I'm at, I get frost, so it actually kills off some of our plants. It's not heavy frost, it's very light frost, but it does affect the warm weather crops, so I can't grow tomatoes through the whole season. Then you have the opposite effect in summer. We get so hot and humid here that the plants struggle to an extreme. And not only that, because we get so much rain and so much humidity, then we're dealing with significant amounts of disease. And then whenever you have a lot of warmth in a tropical region with lots of rain, you have a lot of pests. And the pests go after these plants like you would not believe. So we can't really grow a lot of things during the summer. We have to stick to tropical plants. So if we can't grow tomatoes in the winter and the tomatoes kind of die out of disease and they stop pollinating in the summer, we can only grow them in spring and fall. There are brief windows in spring and fall when we can grow a lot of our warm weather crops. Summers are reserved for our hot weather crops, and then winter is reserved for our cold weather crops. So you really have to get the timing right. And when I say winter, or when I say summer or spring or fall, those actually don't line up to when, you know, the rest of the country determines when winter starts or determines when spring starts. Our spring starts in like February here. Our fall doesn't really start until like October or November. And our winter is the smallest season, and it's basically December, January, and a part of February, like half of February. That's our winter. And then summer makes up a majority of the rest of the time, like April through September. It's an odd season for us down here. And anyway, that is what's important in terms of how you grow your plants or when you start your plants. And I made a lot of mistakes. I've grown broccoli in the middle of summer. Not a good look. I've tried to grow tomatoes through the winter. Once again, they struggle. Like, there is just a lot of very specific timing down here that you really have to hit right. So in these beds, I have a lot of my warm weather crops. So on this side, I feel like on this side, I did everything right. Like, I started this side of the bed at all the right times. My tomatoes, I started them in January. I have some beans down there. I started in like March. I have a collards plant right there. You see it's, you know, going to seed. It's flowering right there. That's because I grew that at the right time, and it grew through the whole winter. It actually gave me greens the entire winter. It was perfect. Then you have this side where I did everything wrong in terms of timing. Let me turn you around so you can see. On this side, I have melons, I have some cabbages, I have tomatoes, I have garlic, and I have cucumbers. And the reason why I say I did all of these wrong, I started a lot of them either early or way too late. So when it came to the melons and the cucumber, I started these too early. And so what have I noticed? You know, I'm happy that I started them early. This is one of the times when I make a mistake, and I'm happy I made the mistake. I started these in trays, which, by the way, melons and cucumbers absolutely hate being started in trays because they don't like being transplanted. So I started about double what I wanted, you know, to end up in the garden. So I had way more of these melons and way more of those cucumbers, but I only put so many in, and I waited to see how they acclimated. I think because I transplanted them in a much cooler season, they acclimated super well. I mean, I don't think I had one. No, I did. I had one cucumber that died off. The rest of them did just fine. So I'm happy I started them early. They got a jump start, and I'm getting cucumbers, which, if you've lived here in Florida long enough, you know that cucumbers are actually quite hard. You're either dealing with pests, you're dealing with disease, or they just don't want to grow at certain times of the year. So starting them a little bit early for me really worked this year. Now the melons, on the other hand, they're super healthy, they're happy, they're nice, but they are growing super slow because melons like really hot weather. They're actually going to do pretty decent through the summer as long as I can keep the pests and the disease at bay. Now the other ones that I didn't get the timing quite right is I had these guys, these cabbages right here in trays for about forever. They were my backup cabbages, and I put them in, I think like in February. I was like, oh, let me try to get one last cabbage crop in. And so I put these guys in February. I can't remember exactly what time. It was probably later in February based on their size. And they're also a purple variety. Purple varieties of cabbage take longer that I have experienced. Maybe there's some fast growing ones, but I have typically learned that if you're growing cabbages and they're purple, they are going to take a lot longer than your green cabbages. I don't really know why that is, but they do take longer. And so not only did I pick a long cabbage, but I then stuck it in at like the latest possible. I'm not holding out a lot of hope for these guys, but I am leaving them in because I like to experiment, and we'll see how long they can go into our summer season before they start really having problems. They have some chew marks, so I know that the slugs and snails are getting to them. Now the tomatoes, on the other hand, I do the same thing. I plant and I grow extra tomatoes, and this year I got a little bit out of hand. I had 42 different varieties of tomatoes. I don't know what I thought I was doing. I just got really excited about growing all these different colors and varieties that I've never tried before, and some that I don't even know if they do well down here. So I wanted to try out a bunch. These guys were like my third planting, and I started them, I want to say I started them like February. Like I started these late. I'm usually a December, January kind of girl when it comes to tomatoes. And then I put them in the ground late too. I mean, these guys just made it into the ground like a week or two ago. But they're doing really, really well. My biggest concern is it's already starting to heat up. I can feel the warmth. It's getting hotter during the days. I can see the 10-day forecast continues to move towards that hotter, hotter, hotter. It's not quite at, you know, the 85 on average day yet. It's almost there. But once it starts getting into above 85 consistently, and especially when the nights are not dropping below 70, the flowers on these plants are just not going to pollinate. The fruit has a really hard time taking hold during these heat of these temperatures. It just doesn't work. The plants might look great, but if they're not flowering and fruiting, then what's the point? So I'm a little bit concerned with that because they're not big enough. They haven't put on enough flowers to, you know, for me to give it a full bed, which is what I've done here. But I'm gonna try. I might even get some shade cloth for these. I usually don't do that. I'm not really big into putting things up that I have to put up and take down and all that stuff. But I might do it. I might do it this year, put some shade cloth on these to see if I can get them to go a little bit longer. Now the garlic, oh, I went away on a vacation this year. We go on vacation in our RV. We leave for months at a time. So it was like 2 months at a time. And I had put some garlic in. There was one variety that I got. It was called Transylvania. I was really excited to get it. It's from Territorial Seed. And they didn't ship it to me until it was much later in the season. I think it was almost before I was leaving. So I think that was like September, October-ish. I was getting ready to leave. They shipped it to me like a week before I left. Our garlic needs to be vernalized, which means it needs to go in the refrigerator for 6 to 12 weeks, minimum 6 to 12 weeks, in order for it to be able to develop cloves. Otherwise, it's just like this big hockey puck of garlic. And it's great. I mean, you could chop it up, mince it up, put it in oil and freeze it, and it'll keep that way, but you're not gonna get whole heads of garlic that are gonna keep that way. So the garlic got put in once I got back, which is around January, which normally what we like to do is get our garlic in anywhere from October to December. The end of December, it depends on when the cold weather kind of comes through is when I plant them. If you want to know about timing, and maybe you haven't gotten your timing right, make sure to check out my book. I have this in an ebook format on my website, homegrownfloridagarden.com. You can pick this up today. So I'm not 100% sure how those garlics are going to go. I'm guessing that they're just not going to be big enough, but we'll see. Maybe we'll get a harvest out of the tomatoes and the garlic. Hopefully. Now I'm going to show you around my container gardens. I keep my raised bed gardens, but I also keep a pretty expansive container garden. And I do have some pots that I use for containers, but my go-to for container gardening is always going to be these green stalks. They just grow so much in a small space. Each one of these is only about 2 square feet. But you can see in 2 square feet, they grow, I believe this right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times 6, 30 plants. Did I get the math on that right? 30 times 5. Yeah. 30 plants in 2 square feet. That's pretty phenomenal. But probably one of the biggest mistakes I make when container gardening is that I put plants too close together. This is particularly bad in a container. I mean, you can get away with it a little bit easier in raised beds or in ground. Whereas containers, it's a really big no-no to grow plants too closely. In fact, you almost want to lean towards giving them the highest recommended space than you do in a garden. And there's reasons why. The biggest reason is because they're in a container and they're in this confined space, they only have so much soil, so much nutrients, so much water that can occur in here. The roots are hindered from going beyond this confined space, where in a raised bed, My beds are open on the bottom, so they can even seek even further down in those really thin roots that really spread out super far. They can go a lot farther in the raised bed than they can in the container here. So giving them a larger size container for what they need is really important to a good productivity. So you'll notice that I have different sizes here. Here is the original size, and this is the leaf, which is the shorter one. In the leaf, I grow plants that don't have a lot of deep roots, and that's going to be things like these lettuces. I have these petunias that are coming in, and I think that's pretty much it on this one. For the larger one, I have a lot of my herbs, and a reason I pick herbs in the larger one is these guys are perennial herbs. A lot of these are, maybe not the basils down there at the bottom, but a lot of these are perennials, and so I want them to have a larger space. The perennials are going to be in here for a long time, I mean for the rest of their life, honestly, and so I want to make sure that they have the deepest pocket as possible. The other thing that I'm doing, I don't know if you noticed while I was spinning this, is I have green beans on one side. We're going to talk about those in a second. And then I have all the herbs on the other side. And the reason for that is a lot of these herbs, like this chocolate mint, this thyme, the sage even, this is tarragon, I believe. And then we have, what is this? That's lavender. Herbs in general spread. They will spread, or I will force them to spread. Eventually, I want each one of these tiers to have nothing but herbs in them, but the same herbs. So like this chocolate mint right here will probably take over about half that container, and then the other half I'm going to try to spread it this way, and I spread it through cuttings. So I'll take some cuttings of this thyme right here, and I'll put it, once these beans are gone, I'll start sticking cuttings of the thyme of this plant over to the next 3 pockets, and I'll do the same with the mint, although the mint spreads pretty good by itself, but I'll try to force it to spread that way for the other 3 pockets. The same thing I'll do with the tarragon and with the lavender and with the sage is I'm going to try to spread them around to other pockets through cuttings until this whole thing ends up being a huge herb garden of all these different herbs. But in the meantime, I do have some green beans. These are annuals. They're only going to grow for a season and then they'll be gone. And their season's almost done. They're actually, let me show you some right here. They have beans on them right now. And these beans are harvestable, and then they have another set of flower that's occurring right here. So I've got like this harvest and then maybe one more harvest before these guys are done. And then I'll start making these moves over. The reason I didn't do it from the beginning is I wanted to make sure that the herbs got established in their area and that they were happy, healthy, and growing before I started taking cuttings and trying to move them. I always like to do that just to make sure that it's a plant that likes this area and so on. But now that that has occurred and they look good and they're growing and these green beans are almost done, once they're done, I'll pull them out and I'll start making those cuttings. The green beans, now GreenStalk says that the green beans you can plant 3 per pod. I have tried that. They will grow, but I get so much better productivity on the green beans if there's no more than 2. Sometimes I do 1, but no more than 2. That's the max. If you hit to the 3, you're getting really poor productivity out of these. Even though GreenStalk recommends that you could do 3, I do 2. This is what I'm talking about when you talk about spacing for containers, is do a lot less than what they recommend or give them a larger space. So a bigger container or use less plants. And let me show you this last one right here. This is, I'm growing a lot of different things in here. This is probably my oldest herb container. This is also an original, so it's got the 12-inch deep pockets, but I have some oregano that I've been growing for years. I have garlic chives down there for a couple years. I have sorrel that's been going for I think 5 years. This is, I believe this is the lemon balm. This is mint. This parsley has been going for a couple years as well. This is my older one. I still have some winter crops in here like this celery and then these cabbages, but those are coming out, and as they're starting to kind of die off or I harvest them, I've been putting in more heat tolerant greens. So I have some rhubarb Swiss chard right there, and then I put in, these were perpetual spinach, and I think I've got even an Ethiopian kale that I'm really excited about. These is going to end up being like a partial summer green stock as well as an herb, and I kind of like during the summer taking my tropical greens, my greens that I grow inside in my arrow garden, and then some of these herbs, and putting it all together in a salad, and it is, oh, chef's kiss, so perfect. So that is what I have learned about growing in containers, and specifically about spacing in containers. Next up, we're going to take a look at are my fruit trees. If you are into growing fruit, you know, if you know, you know, right? It is so rewarding to grow fruit trees, although it's a love story that goes a long time, because some of these trees I have owned for 6 years or more. Like my peach tree that's behind us, I've owned probably the longest, close to the longest. I think I have a lemon tree that has gone through a lot of iterations of cuttings that's actually a little bit older than this peach tree, but the peach tree came from my last house and it was still in a pot. I put it in the ground here. But so it's going on a number of years, and all the rest of these trees I got from Green Dreams, and I made my little fruit tree row is what we call it. So we have the peaches, plums. That guy right down there is loquats. After that, I have a pomegranate. It's one of the only trees in this row that hasn't produced yet, but they do take longer, so I'm leaving it alone. We're gonna give it one more year, but I've already told it it's about to lose its spot to something else if it doesn't get with the program. Down at the far end there, I have 2 mulberries planted just 2 feet apart, and they have done phenomenal. They are dwarf varieties. On the other side of the fence, I have an avocado tree that got damaged really bad during this last winter because we had a colder than normal winter, but it's already starting to bounce back. It looks beautiful. This side tends to take a little bit longer to come out of dormancy, mainly because I think how long it takes for the sun to really hit this side. When the sun moves in the sky during winter, this side gets really shaded, and so as we're coming out of winter, this side takes longer to come out of dormancy. So this is my Indian berry. Everything else has leaves except for this guy. It is taking a little bit, but I can already see like it's got huge flushes of berries. Typically a fruit tree is going to push off its flowers first, and then it'll push off its leaves. That's kind of typical to what I've seen. Not all of them, but a lot of them do that. Right next to that, I have a plum in a pot. Yes, you can grow peaches and plums in pots. He's not super excited about being in the pot, but he is still producing. He's got fruit on him. I mainly use him to graft to this one. And then beyond that, I have my elderberry tree that I'm trying to keep into a bush size. And then beyond that, I have a very sad looking blackberry. It's sad right now because once again, it is probably the shadiest blackberry ever. So it's having a little bit harder of a time to coming out of dormancy, but I can already see leaves forming. This happens every year because of the place where I put this blackberry, but it comes back and it produces abundantly. It's just a little bit later than most everyone else's blackberries that get full sun here. Now, what do we have to learn? What is my biggest mistake in growing fruit here in Florida? Well, it's gonna be pruning, right? When I got Peachy, the peach tree, I didn't prune her. I didn't even know anything about pruning. I just was like, leave her alone, don't touch her. That's been my kind of go-to whenever I started any kind of plant, is leave it be, because nature knows what it's supposed to do. We shouldn't have to intervene that much. And so that has always been kind of an approach of mine, is leave her be until you see something that needs it. And so I took that approach in the beginning when it came to fruit trees, and that's not the best approach. Pruning your fruit trees is important, especially if you're going for productivity, and especially if you're growing in a small space. I have a yard. I have a decent sized yard. I think it's like a 1/4 of an acre, so or a third. I can't remember exactly, but it's an average size. It's not like super big. I don't have like an acre or anything, and it's not super small. My last house was even smaller, so I have grown in very small spaces before. And that's one of the reasons why you see a lot of pots, because there was a time when I grew a lot of my fruit trees in pots, and they do produce. They don't like it in general. Like, some of them can handle it better than others, and they are going to produce less in a pot than if you put them in the ground, but there are options out there for small space gardeners. But the biggest thing that I learned was, if you are not pruning your fruit tree, you're basically allowing them to get as big as they want. And that means they're going to outgrow their pot faster. It means they're going to outgrow each other and block sunlight from each other. It means that their roots are going to become very aggressive underground. And they're going to be so focused on putting on this big height and all these leaves that they're going to forget that their main purpose is to grow fruit, right? But you got to kind of think of it from the plant's perspective, right? So the tree's perspective is to grow big and strong and have lots of leaves and, you know, grow its life cycle, live its life, right? And its reason for producing fruit is to replicate itself or reproduce itself. So it wants to have babies. But is its primary goal to have babies? No, its primary goal is to live and to enjoy and to get bigger and, you know, be the big tree on the block, you know? So it really just wants to grow, and then babies are part of that process. So if you really want it to go big at growing babies, you need to get it to stop focusing on being the big dog in the yard, to being the big tree around the block, right? You need to get it to focus on, you need to produce babies, not be super big. And so one of the ways that we do that is thinning it, doing some heading cuts to keep it shorter and more stout. There's a great book called Grow a Little Fruit Tree. I recommend it every time I talk about fruit trees because it really was eye-opening to me to think about how fruit trees produce. It's different than growing a garden. It's different than an annual vegetable garden. It's different than dealing with perennials. Fruit trees have a whole nother world, and I think Grow a Little Fruit Tree is a great book if you're in a small space and you can't be growing these trees in huge sizes. I think even if you had like acres and acres of property, I think it's still a good book to read because the pruning techniques that it talks about helps with productivity. It can also hurt productivity. There's a level of pruning. If you go beyond like a certain amount, you are pushing the tree to produce less, but it's producing more in a certain size space. I know that sounds backwards. Let me give this as an example. I got a peach tree right there, I got a plum tree right here. They are 12 feet apart. They should be closer to 25 to 30 feet apart, so double what they are. I don't have that much space to give them that much room. So if I keep this tree small, like this size right here, it's sitting about 6.5, maybe 7 feet right now. If I can keep this tree small, I can grow 2 smaller trees in the space of 1. So that means I can grow 2 different types of fruit. I can grow peaches and plums in the same space that 1 full-grown tree would grow. The other thing I do is I grow with dwarf sizes so I can keep them small, dwarf fruit stocks so I can keep them small. Now what that does do is it means that my peach tree is going to produce less and my plum tree is going to produce less. The peach tree that I have should produce about 600 peaches a year. It probably only produces like 300, I think is what I average. It might be a little bit more this year, a little bit less, whatever. But it's about half of what it should produce. And the same goes with this plum tree, and it's because I'm keeping them small. But the cool thing is I'm growing 2 trees in the same space that I would grow 1. So I could get 600 peaches, or I can get 300 peaches and 300 plums. To me, it makes more sense to get 2 different fruits. But if you are absolutely in love with peaches and you want the full 600, you can definitely do that. Or another option is you could still keep them small and grow 2 different kinds of peaches. So maybe you like white peaches and yellow peaches, or maybe you want like a small size sweet peach or a large size canning peach. You know what I mean? Like there are options out there, and you can do more trees, more varieties in shorter spaces, but you're going to get a smaller productivity or a little bit less of a productivity. Normally, that is fine because peach tree, or any trees, all fruit trees produce enormous amounts of fruits. It is not a small amount of fruit that these things produce. So I guess it really depends on how much fruit you want to get. And a lot of us are going to be like, oh, I could totally eat 600 peaches. Yeah, I thought so too. We call my husband the peach monster because the guy can eat peaches like I have never seen. He can't keep up with the 300 that we get, even though I can them. He does go through them in a year. I mean, honestly, like he probably goes through them in about 6 months. So I could definitely do for another peach tree or let this one get even bigger. But by the time he's had 6 months of peaches, he doesn't want any more peaches. That's the thing. He could eat a year. He could eat double, but he doesn't want any more. He wants a little bit more variety. Then he's leaning to the blueberries, or he wants some plums, or he wants some avocados, or, you know, some tangerines or whatever. He wants some variety. He doesn't just want 600 peaches, which I know is shocking because I didn't know the peach monster would be sick of peaches, but that does actually happen. So I say all that to say, don't be afraid to prune your fruit trees because there is a lot of really beneficial reasons to pruning them: for health, pruning them for size, pruning them for productivity. Get in there, get them pruned. Don't make my mistakes and wait years to do it, and then you end up with a tree that's not as productive as it could have been. We moved out into the pool deck because the next thing, the biggest mistake that I made, was not starting enough plants. So out here is where I start all my seeds. We're heading into summer, so a lot of my seeds that I'm starting are mainly like flowers. I realized that my summer seeds that I usually start are more like direct seeds. When I'm talking about peanuts, jicama, beans, cowpeas, even the Seminole pumpkins, all of them like to be direct seeded and they do very well. So I'm not really focused on starting any of those in trays right now, but typically I start a lot of my plants in trays, especially like the warm weather and the cold weather crops that we just got done with. I start a lot of those in trays, but right now I have, what do I have? I have some coneflower, I have some mint, I have some celosia, I have summer savory. I've never grown that before. I have larkspur, petunias, oh, my blackberry lilies. These are for the front. I'm so excited. They do so well here. I've got some echinacea. I've got rudbeckia. I have a toothache medicinal plant that's growing very well. I've got more petunias because I'm addicted, and I have gophrynia. I've never grown that before. I think it's super cute. I have some other herbs over there. I have my new favorite. Look at this thing. Okay, so this is a chayote squash that I'm growing. Once it gets a little bit bigger, one's gonna go in pot, one's gonna go in the ground next to the elderberry so it can grow. I have some brand new blueberries that I'm growing here. These are pink lemonade blueberries. I'm so excited about those too. I think this is, I didn't even label it. It's a, I think it's a watermelon. I believe this is a watermelon. Yeah, it's definitely a watermelon. So that's a watermelon. I have some roselle. The biggest thing, or the biggest mistake that I learned, and it really definitely goes into talking about this watermelon right here. You saw we had watermelons in the garden. Why do I have this one sitting here? Well, my big mistake was when I started growing gardens, I would plant the amount of plants I wanted to go out into the garden. So I would start seeds for 5 tomato plants, and I'd be like, okay, I want 5 tomato plants. I'm gonna start 5 seeds. Wrong plan, because you have to account for loss. Not just in that some seeds are not going to sprout. Not all germination rates are 100%. Naturally, some plants like carrots and onions have very low germination rates. So you need to account for that in the amount of seeds that you put down. If you're starting them in trays, you have a loss that happens when you transplant them out into the garden. This is one of the reasons why I have this watermelon, this little random watermelon sitting here, is because this guy was staying in a tray to make sure that all of those take. Once all of those take, which they all did, I usually will get rid of this or find another place for it in the garden. Honestly, I don't have another place for it, so I'm probably just gonna chuck that one or give it to a friend. But if I didn't have this one on standby, just sitting here waiting, and one of those died out, I would have nothing to put in its place. I would lose out on that watermelon. Another example of this is if you start them directly in the bed and you start them perfectly. I'm going to put 1 bean seed every 4 to 6 inches because that's how their spacing is going to be. Unfortunately, then you have a bird come by and they take some of your bean seeds. Now you have to restart those. It's a lot easier just to do 1 every 2 inches. And let, you know, nature take its course and the bird to take it and some of them not to germinate, and then you can thin them later. I know thinning is something that most gardeners don't like to do, and I understand you're killing a baby plant that you have spent time doing, but if you go into it with the mindset that I am going to get rid of some plants, I'm starting some plants that I am going to eventually kill, it's a little bit easier of a mindset to do. So if you're starting extra watermelons, I usually have even more than this. That's how much of a loss I had, is I usually have at least double the plants that are out there. So I have like 4 plants out there. I should have 4 here, but I only have 1. You could see how much I lost through this entire process, either through germination or transplanting. But if you go in knowing I'm starting double, I only have room for 4, but I'm starting 8, I'm going to kill plants deliberately, then it's a little bit easier to deal with thinning. It's a little bit easier when one of them doesn't work out. You're like, oh, let me put down some netting so the birds don't take them next time, or let me put a collar around it so the cutworm doesn't take it. It's almost like you get a second try at the plant when you have backups available. And it also doesn't hurt your feelings. Like, it does not hurt my feelings one bit to chuck this into the compost bin. Maybe it'll even grow out of the compost, who knows? It doesn't bother me because I know I've got healthy plants that are doing very well over there. I don't need this guy. Yeah, it's a little bit wasteful of seed, but honestly, guys, seeds are cheap. Well, they were cheap. They still are. You can find places like MI Gardener has some very cheap seeds, and they're very good. I like them. There's flgardening.com has really cheap bundle packs. There's a lot of places still out there. Dollar General has some really cheap seeds. So seeds are cheap in relation to food. You can save your own seed. That makes them super cheap. I call that free, honestly. Maybe that's gardener math, but I call that free. So if you can focus on the mindset that I am going to be starting way more plants and I am going to be killing off some plants either through this thinning or just tossing or giving away, maybe the process of going through this is not going to be as hurtful. I think it's really important once you're able to get over that hurdle. I think you're going to see a lot more success in your garden, and you're going to have a lot less hurt feelings when things don't work out the way that we anticipate them to. We have to remember that a lot of the times the garden doesn't work for a lot of other reasons than just the gardener. There is, pests, there's birds, there's soil issues, there's climate, there's late frosts, there's early summers, there's a hurricane. I could go, there was your neighbor who accidentally did some overspray of an herbicide. There is a ton of things that can happen that have zero to do with you. So having backups is really the way that I handle those, terrible things that happen to us that we have no control over. It's very easy to get on ourselves as gardeners and say that we don't have a green thumb or that, we screwed up the garden and that's not the case. The best that you can do is support the garden in hopes that it's going to produce. And some of the ways that I help support my garden is always having a backup plant. All of these don't have a place to go except for these guys. These do and these do. I have specific places where these are going, but all the rest of these, I have no idea where I'm putting them. I'm waiting for a plant to keel over and die, and then these guys will have a spot. It definitely helps with my mindset that I'm not so upset when something doesn't work out, because I always have something to go in its place, something else that's going to excite me. And sometimes it does mean I have to throw some plants away like this one. But most of the time, I got to tell you that there's probably only about maybe 20% that I'm getting rid of. Most of the time something dies out in the garden and it's a replacement. There's almost always a spot for these guys. So it's not that wasteful. And like I said, seeds are cheap. So give it a shot for just one season. Grow double of what you're expecting, with the idea you're going to thin or you're going to throw them away. And I bet you just from that one action, you're going to see a huge improvement in your productivity and your success in the garden, and a lot less, feelings that you have, failed, or that things haven't worked out, or you didn't get what you wanted. Like, those sad feelings are going to go away, and you're going to have a lot more excitement and productivity in the garden. It gives you an opportunity to experiment as well. Maybe I'm telling you that something doesn't work this time of year, but then you go and you try it at a certain time of year and it does work. Cool. You've learned something new about your particular space that you wouldn't have known had you not had some extra plants available. Thanks for hanging out with me today as we learned of all the different mistakes I've made that hopefully you guys can avoid. If you learned something new, or if you're going to try something from this video, head down in the comments and let me know. Don't forget to grab your ebook, the Homegrown Florida Gardening Guide. I hope you enjoy it. Happy gardening, guys.